Oh, one more time for joyful noise. And the fact that you wrote that song and it's about a butterfly just kind of reminded me of a story that I wasn't going to share today, but it's a butterfly story. So thank you so much. If it comes out, you'll know. You all know because I just said it. So grateful to be here. I want you to take just for a moment and just kind of deeply relax and just feel a moment in your time when maybe just everything was going perfectly right. You were imbued with joy, excitement, love. It was as if you were in the flow and every synchronistic moment was happening absolutely perfectly. You were with the best of friends, or maybe you were out in nature. Or maybe it was when you were a kid and you were playing and running down the street, flying kites or riding bikes. This is the experience or the state of beingness that when you're living your dream or living that authentic self purpose or whatever you want to call it, passion, your greatest joy, your highest excitement, we have 10,000 words for this. And it doesn't have to be defined by a career. Can be, but can it just be a way of being? And so the definition of the dream is really up to you. And so I'm going to basically share my story, but I'm going to share these 7 principles that I felt were refined as I went across country. And they're really about, number 1, it's your dream. It's really what's up. That's defined by you. Number 2, you don't need anybody's permission. You don't need to seek approval. Number 3, and this is a big one, you're already ready. Which leads me to number 4. Move. Nothing really happens until action, right? Take that one small step towards your dream, whatever that is. Open up to trust. Trust is the next principle. Trust, when we can be in the trusting of the universe, trusting of knowing that there's a divine sense of me that's greater than myself, and my own little beingness, that probably knows the way when I don't. And so be open to the guidance. Trust and open to the guidance kind of goes hand in hand. And then the one I threw in there, which I feel is really the pinnacle of them all, is just stay in a high vibe state regardless of whatever happens. Whether there is rain or whether there is something like a flat tire, which I had a few of those, just know that enjoy that moment too. Just know that it's all good. And the last, which I think is the most defining thing, is be the journey. It's all about the journey, not the destination. We're trained and conditioned in life to be destination seekers. We have SMART goals. We have things that are like dead lines. Think of that word, dead lines, right? Enjoy the journey. Enjoy the journey. Because it's happening through you in every single moment. And so the more that you can be in the joy of the journey, it doesn't really matter. I had so many people that were asking me, like, where are you ending up? Where are you going? Where are you, what's the end point? I said, I'm going west. And they'd be like, can you be specific? I said, yeah, the Pacific. That's as specific as I could be. So it's part of just knowing that, as you point in the right direction of your dreams, desires, and goals, the universe will help take you there. For every step you take, there's a synchronistic thing that's happening to kind of encourage you, as well as create that pathway of flow for you. So in the very first thing was the knowing that it's your dream. As I started sharing this and started talking to people, it's not everybody's dream. And that second thing, you're not always going to get support from everybody. I got a lot of support from this community. There are people that were liking my Facebook posts, and they were sharing them, and they were commenting on them. And I would wake up in the morning, like in my tent, and I would see these things, and I'd be like, that would give me the fuel for the day. So I really expressed gratitude because that encouragement really, really helped me to know that there was other people out there like engaged with the process of me riding across the country. But the whole thing about living your dream and knowing that you don't necessarily need approval from others. There were people that the friends that didn't. There was one friend of mine that said, Ron, you're 63 years old and it's an old Schwinn bicycle. It's 30 years old. You got to get a new bike. And are you ready? Like, he was like really nervous for me. And sometimes our friends and our family are like, they double question everything you think of. But know that you don't necessarily need approval. Some will, some won't. It's really about your dream. And the whole concept of being ready, I didn't really train, I'll be honest. I did one of these overnighters, test the gear, I found a campground, I rode to it, set up my tent, and then I was like, didn't really put in the hours of training. And matter of fact, I had some health issues that were going on, and I was kind of in my mind thinking like, oh, I don't know if should I put this off, type of thing. Should I put this off? And as I started riding, I actually started getting better. So as you move forward, you become conditioned. Your legs get stronger. When you're sitting on a little saddle too, your butt starts to get acclimated to it too. So I mean, it's one of those things that as you move forward, then you start to become healthier. You start to become stronger. You start to have that stronger vision in your mind. And actually, I want to call out Dr. Harvey Kalsis. I did an interview with you probably a whole year before this event, and I did a podcast. He was on my podcast, and I asked you a question about what is the number one secret to health, and vitality. And he said a sense of purpose, a dream, a passion, something that's inside of him. Because the thing that you said was most of your patients, it wasn't that they didn't get sick, they just healed faster because there was something driving inside of them. So for that sake, even for our own health and well-being, having a passion, having an interest, having something that moves us forward, and you're always ready. Even when you don't think you are, you're always ready. And then to step into it, to move. Any movement in the direction of our dream, our desires, or our goals is a good movement. There's no bad movement. You become refined as you move along. And we don't necessarily know the best way. Our higher self does. But the fact is until we start to move, that's when everything happens. I started my journey in Washington, D.C. Why Washington, D.C.? Well, I looked at a couple of different bike routes across the United States. One was the Trans-American route, which is a famous route. It's probably one of the oldest routes. There was another one called the Great American Rail Trail. It was a company that had, or a nonprofit agency that went to all the resources of old rail tracks that were being pulled up and decided to make bicycle trails. And actually, I raised some money out along the way to actually help send it to them afterwards, because I feel the project that they're doing, who wouldn't want more bike trails? Bike trails, hiking trails, through cities, through areas that you just couldn't normally ride bikes. And we have a wonderful one here. And so that's the Legacy Trail. And so they're behind this entire activity. Well, they created this thing called the Great American Rail Trail, which is to get from Washington, D.C. all the way out to Washington State, yet it's in pieces. It's not finished. And I kind of knew that, but I figured, why not do this anyways? Because I'd rather be on trails more than in traffic. And then so I started on the C&O Trail, which was in Washington, D.C. I broke my chain the first day. But I had the links, and I was able to fix it. And it was amazing how many people stopped to ask for help, can I help you? And I got that continuously the whole trip. And then I got to my campground. I had not slept on the train all the way up because I put my bike on a train in Winter Haven, Florida, got to the train station in Washington, D.C., rode around the mall for a while, broke the chain, got a little bit lost. I wasn't following my GPS. And then I finally got to the point where the first campground on the C&O Canal Trail was, and I was just so tired. So I didn't really make big headway the first day, but I moved. And that's what was good. And the campgrounds in the C&O Trail, they were free. They're primitive campgrounds, porta potties, but they're free. And they were first come, first served, and I would see other cyclists and other hikers there, and it was great. And as I got onto the Gap Trail, the Great Allegheny Passage, which once you get into Pennsylvania takes you all the way to Pittsburgh, and then there's other trails beyond that. Now that actually had a lot of camping opportunities as well. The realization, though, is as I got to Ohio, things changed a little bit, and I was trying to figure out where do I camp. I was going to Parks and Recs Department and police stations, and actually one police officer took me to the park. He said, you just follow me. I have to lock the gate like by, I forget when it was, like 6 or 7 o'clock, and I'm going to lock you in. so nobody can bother you. So not only did I get permission to camp in a park, but I got my own private park. So you have to ask. That's part of the exploration. I didn't necessarily know where I was going to stay. I couldn't plan that far ahead. But everything always worked out. There was one time I was coming through these trees. It was on the Ohio Erie Trail, and I was coming through these trees, and it was starting to get dark, and I always had this affirmation that I'll have perfect accommodations by nightfall. I started saying the affirmation louder, because it wasn't happening. I know I'm going to have perfect accommodations. So anyways, what happened was I came out, and there was a father and son playing baseball, and so I asked them if they knew about any campground. He was nice enough to say I could camp in his backyard, but he knew of actually it was a cyclist campground that was off this trail, and it wasn't that far away. And then he met me there later with food. His family owns a restaurant in town. So he brought these bags of food, and him and his son sat down with me, and we talked for a while. So just these wonderful opportunities as things go on. So part of that is just trusting and knowing that sometimes it's going to change. Sometimes it's going to change. Even when you're totally in the unknown. And this is where the butterfly comes in. I was actually on one trail, and I forget the trail, but at the end of each trail, when it ends, you got to take regular roads to go get to that next trail. And so I would put these data points in my phone, because I was using an app that was allowing me to GPS. So as soon as I just ride the trail with no GPS. Why would I need it? I get to the end of the trail and then go to my phone, and there was no cell signal. And I oh, this is interesting. It's like I'm walking around, and it was a left and a right, a left and a right. And there's a 50-50 chance of making a right decision, or a 50-50 chance of making a wrong decision, right? But if you think as a possibilitarian, you know there's really no wrong decision. There's just movement, right? So what happened at that point was the strangest thing was there was this little yellow butterfly who flew. I don't know where he came from, but he flew. It was like he was flying right towards my third eye, flying right towards my head, and then does this circle around my head, which I thought was strange, and started dancing in the direction to the left. And I'm like, oh, Mr. Butterfly? Or Miss Butterfly? Is that the way? And then it was it repeated the pattern. What does that tell you? I decided to ride to the left, and then the butterfly actually kind of kept with me for a little while. Eventually, I got to a point where my phone kicked in, and I was going the right way. The universe is conscious. It's with you all the time. And the moment that we see these clues and recognize them. So the rerouting, I got to a point where I ended up taking this Great American Rail Trail, less campgrounds. There was one difficult moment where I just kind of had to find a place, and there was the neighborhood dogs already sniffed me out, and they're I don't know if I could camp here. I moved a little bit more. So finally, I got up and I said, I got to figure out a better way. I had found on an app it's called Warm Showers. It's like couch surfing. You familiar with couch surfing? It was an app called Couch Surfing. This is for cyclists. It's cyclists supporting cyclists. They're hosting them in their homes. And so I reached out to a few people along the way, and I reached out to this lovely couple, Bill and Cassie, who had done a cross-country trip together years before. And they have a farm just outside of Kokomo, Indiana, and I ended up staying with them for the evening. And it was just fun to listen to their stories. And they said, how do you feel about the Great American Rail Trail? I said, there's not a lot of camping. And then as he shared his adventure with this other trail, which is the Trans-American Trail, which has been made by the Adventure Cycling Association, one of the oldest trails, there was always camping. There was always, and he actually showed me the app with the maps on it, and I zoomed in on the app and said, what are those green things? He goes, those are campgrounds. What are those red things? Those are grocery stores. What are those, you know what? Oh, those are bike shops. Everything was mapped out. I'm like, wow, this is a cyclist's dream. I downloaded the app, we figured, okay, for me to get from A to B and also ride this, the Katy Trail, which I wanted to ride the Katy Trail, I figured like this is a diversion. I had to take a hard left. I had to kind of not really backtrack, but go a little different. I know I was adding days to my entire journey, but it's a long journey, so why not? And then I figured I had to get some of these people to the Warm Showers app, campgrounds, and find out how many points I could make it to there. And I have a friend that I worked for 30 years ago, and I called him up, same phone number, and he actually invited me to stay at his house, and he was like 70 miles from where I was starting. So I stayed with him, I stayed with some other people, and it was absolutely fantastic. So it all works out, and realize that as you go in the direction of your dreams, desires, and goals, you may not necessarily have to fixate on that endpoint. It may change. How many of us are doing the same thing we did when we were first set off into the working world, right? One. But the thing is it's being open to that change. See, insistence creates resistance. The more that we insist on things that we have to be a certain way, the more we become fixated and it's got to be this way or not, the more that we can create resistance to the very thing that's flowing through us and flowing through the essence of the universe that supports our dream. Just know what it is that you're excited for. And when they shared this story with me, I was super excited, and so then got up early the next morning, and I made a beeline, and I hit all those spots. I stayed at different people's places. I got to the Katy Trail, rode the Katy Trail out, and then I ended up getting onto Trans-American Trail. And as I got to a certain point in the Trans-American Trail, I was halfway through Kansas, I did this trip when I made a decision. A lot of people asked me, are you going to ride solo, or are you going to ride with a group? And I said, I really want to ride solo. It would be nice. I tried to ask a few friends, like, would you like to do this with me? And everybody was like, yeah, but the excuses came out. Yeah. And then, so finally I'm halfway across the country, and everything is going good, and I'm in the middle of Kansas, and there's like cornfields, it's hot, I'm tired, I'm riding down the shoulder of a highway, and I hear this voice, are you going west? And I'm like, God? Why are you out of breath? And it was another cyclist who had just caught up to me, and he saw my bags, and I was seeing a lot of people going east, but I wasn't seeing anybody going west. And so he caught up to me, and his name was Nate, and because of the traffic, we said, let's find a place to sit down and eat, and we discussed this because we thought, wouldn't that be great? He was having some, struggles with some things where he wanted to quit. He said, twice I was ready to quit. And no, we can do this. And he was also what I call a bicycle genius. He had the high-tech bike. I had this old 30-year-old Schwinn. I mean, literally, everywhere I was going, everybody had these modern machines. It's like going to a Tesla party with a 1973 Ford Pinto. It's like you don't really fit in. You don't really fit in. And I would constantly get I'm not the average age of a cyclist, and I've got an older bike, and I constantly get these you're going across country with that? You? And then when I get to New Mexico, California, it's like, yeah, you went across the country with something like that. That's pretty cool. So the fact is, you've got to be able to be open to this. And I was open to the fact that my journey changed at that moment. I had another individual, and we were supporting each other. And there were times where he was really gifted in the area of bikes, and he also I was using my cell phone and an app, and sometimes I would shut the app off. I just kind of knew, the general direction. I would look at the map, I said, that's good enough. I even had paper maps. He has this high-tech computer, and he knows the elevation, he knows the wind direction, and I'm like, that's too much. And he would be like, I don't want to scare you. I'm like, eventually, when we crossed the Rockies, see, the thing about being ready, you can't train in flat Florida for the Rockies. But by the time you get there, you're ready. And the way I look at it is, for every mountain you climb, you eventually get to the top. So it didn't really matter to me whether or not the elevation, and here was these areas that they would go orange and then they go red. And then he would tell me that we're going into a red. I'm like, it doesn't really matter. I got a lower gear. And the lowest gear is getting off and pushing. And there are times when you have to do that. But for every up, there's a down. And so there's always a down. And the fact is, most cyclists realize that there's two things that cause resistance. There's climbing hills and there's wind. The basic difference is you've got the ability to shift and adjust to that. The nice thing about climbing a hill is eventually you get to the top and you can coast down the other side. There's the vista, there's that moment of excitement. The wind is this aggravating thing that just doesn't seem to have some sort of climax to it. It's just there. And in our life, we got those things where we achieve something and we feel great about it. And then there's that other times when there's maybe this annoyance that's going on like the wind, and yet we don't necessarily see the purpose in it. And that's true with so many things in our life. The more that we follow our dream, the more that we get through it. The more that we understand that sometimes those things make us stronger, don't they? So it's being able to embody that and know that that's going for you, not against you. The other principle is being able to move, to get going in your direction, but being able to be self-aware of that it's the time that you're spending in that activity of your dream, whatever it might be. And it's being consciously aware of the distractions in the world. I had to make the decision that I had to get away from screen time and live my dream time. We know the screens in our life, TV screens, laptop screens, cell phone screens. The more that you can live in your dream time and less in the screen time. The things that are going on in the outer world, I don't have as much control over. I can be focused on the woes of the world, or I can be focused on the wow within my dream. And Ernest Holmes has a famous quote that the practitioner that's in prayer turns away 180 degrees away from the problem and anchors in the new truth. They need to have their consciousness in their new truth. It's much like Tony Robbins' quote, which is, energy goes where attention flows. Right? So the same thing is like being able to detach from the screen time, detach from those things, and being able to focus. We're vibrational beings. The more we raise our vibration in the consciousness of love, of joy, of living our dream, the more that we're having this intrinsic effect, because we're all divinely connected to the divine matrix of humanity. And the more that we can do that, the more that we can shift consciousness. This has been proven through the Maharishi effect. Lynn McTaggart has done this in the attention experiment. We've seen many of these things. Heart math is heavily involved in this. Even in the 100th monkey effect, if you look at that, the more that we reach critical mass by everybody living their joy, living their dream, living their purpose, whatever that might be, as an artist, as a musician, as a person that's maybe into solar energy or gardening or whatever it is, writing, or being a coach, or being just a good listener and a good friend. These are all innately whatever calls us. Whatever calls us. So the biggest thing I found in this entire trip was that everything always worked out. Everything always worked out. I always had the support. I always ran across the most interesting characters. I remember one morning getting up really early. I was on the Katy Trail, and it was like still dark, and I'm riding with my light, and I see a light coming through the trail, coming through the woods, and it's like higher up on somebody's head, and it was a runner. His name was Jack, and he was running across the country. And I left that situation like, at least I can coast. There's times when I can I got the wind at my back. It's like, so whatever your dream, live for that moment, live in the possibility, live knowing that it's more about the journey. It's more about the journey. And we may never reach the exact destination that we want, but if we're in that joy of the journey, what does it matter? I'll leave you with one last story. And it was funny because when I got to the Santa Monica Pier, so that was the final destination. The specific became the Pacific at the Santa Monica Pier. And both Nate and I made it there, and it was fun, it was joyful. And we did this thing called the tire dip. He was there, one of his friends was there. It's like, you got to do the tire dip. And of course, the pier is up here, the sand is down here. I got to bring my bike down. I had all my bags on my bike. And as I get to the Pacific, hit the ocean, this huge wave comes up and drenches like half of me, comes into my wheels and my derailleurs. And anyways, I ended up, and it was cold water. It was refreshing, but I did my tire dip. So now all I got to do is I'm getting ready to fly out the next day, and I got to go to my hotel, which was in El Segundo, which was 10 miles away. And I didn't realize as I started moving with all this sand that my derailleur froze, my back derailleur froze, and I was stuck in probably one of my most challenging gears. But it doesn't matter. I'm 10 miles, and it's over. Pack up the bike, get ready to fly home the next day. As ice went down, and it went along the beach. It was a beautiful boardwalk. Reverend Emil knows it's a beautiful boardwalk, and you got cyclists and roller skaters there, and people walking their dogs, and it was a beautiful sunny day. And here I am, like, this doesn't matter if I'm in this tough gear, because it's like, I'm going to make it, right? And then I turned to look to my hotel, which was in El Segundo, and it's like this mile-long hill. And I'm like, how do I do this? And I was like contemplating, do I get off my bike and do I walk it? Do I just walk it? I mean, there's no shame in walking your bike, right? Or do I just stand up on my pedals and just crank as hard as I can and get as much momentum? I decided to do that because I figured it's my one last try. So I got going, and as it turned out, it's like I was breathing heavier and heavier. Kept looking down because I didn't want to look up, because the more I looked up, the more intimidated I got. Like, that seems to be getting farther and farther away. And as I got to like halfway point, it was like, I couldn't breathe. It was like you have that burning feeling like in your lungs. And I get to the crest, to the top of the hill, and this guy half my age in a skinny little tire bike with like a racing bike goes by me and goes, "Wow, I'm impressed." And I wanted to say thank you, but no words came out. I couldn't breathe. I went 3,500 miles for some sort of affirmation from a stranger, and I'm like, whoa, that feels good. So whatever it is, live your dream, whatever that intention is. It doesn't have to be simple, it doesn't have to be grand. It's calling you. It's really calling you. It's within you. It's the song of your heart. And the more that you know that and connect with that, just know that the principles will always work with you. The principles that we teach here. Know that it's your dream. Know that you don't have to have anybody else's approval. And the fact that as soon as you step into it, you'll find your way. You're already ready. And the more that you move, and the more that you open up to trust, and the more that you stay in that high vibe state, even during those low vibe moments, and be the journey. And that destination becomes you. And it is your not only gift to yourself, it's probably the greatest gift that you can give to the world. Thank you.
Ron Frost.